Welcome everybody to Window into COP24, live from Katowice, Poland. Thanks for joining us today. We have a great group of people here for you to hear from, including Alissa Matthies Tamasi from our own Window into COP24 delegation. But I wanted to take a second and introduce myself as well as Climate Generation. So we are a nonprofit in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we were founded in 2006 by Will Steger, and we essentially live out his legacy. He is a man who knows no limits, and we know that the power of human determination is something that we all need to work together to emulate as we work on climate change together. And so as we work on our mission, empowering individuals and their communities to engage in solutions to climate change, we carry that with us both in Minnesota and beyond. So we work with educators, youth, the public, and influentials to engage them in climate literacy and action, whether it's on the local scale, the national, or the international. And so our history with COPs, we are established as an accredited organization able to send delegations over there. So we started in 2009 with Copenhagen, or COP15, back when we were known as the Will Steger Foundation. And we sent a delegation of Midwest youth there. And the next big delegation that we sent was in 2015 with COP21 in Paris, where we sent a delegation of 10 teachers to act as critical messengers for climate literacy and energy to students, hundreds of students across the nation. So that was a really fantastic program. And last year for COP23, we sent a multi-sector delegation, recognizing that it takes all voices to act on climate change and all voices must be represented at the table. So that was a really fantastic program as well. And this year we're excited to send 4 business leaders from the small level to the multinational level to represent the power of the private sector in these negotiations. So as we think about COP24, the 3 key things, COP24 is the 24th annual conference to assess the progress and make decisions on global climate action as parties continue their work to implement the Paris Agreement. And though the United States has said that they would remove themselves from the Paris Agreement, this actually doesn't take into effect until November of 2020, 2 days after the election. So we're not officially out yet. And the Paris Agreement, just the standard definition for those who may not know, is the first framework for setting, assessing, and ratcheting of greenhouse reduction goals. And this is one of the important reasons why we're excited to send U.S. businesses, specifically Minnesota-based businesses, to COP24, because the private sector is really the leading force in continuing to provide the leadership and the commitment to uphold these Paris Agreement goals for our country. And I'm sure our panelists can speak a lot more to what's happening on the ground in Poland regarding this. In Minnesota, we're proud to be a member of the U.S. Climate Alliance, as well as the We Are Still In initiative, which you'll hear more about today. And you may have heard also, we're really excited that our major utility, Xcel Energy, just committed to 100% carbon-free energy by 2050, which will, in results, make it a lot easier for businesses to achieve their climate goals as well. So we've got a lot going on here and a lot to be proud of, and we're excited to represent that today. So as we think about COP24, before I turn it over to our panelists, Patricia Espinosa, who's the Executive Secretary of the UN Convention on Climate Change, really said COP21 was the birth of the Paris Agreement, but Poland, or as they call it, Paris 2.0, is really what's putting all of the pieces together and making it work smoothly across the globe. So I'm excited now to turn it over to our COP24 delegate, Alissa Matthies Tamasi, who is a corporate responsibility lead at Target. And in her role, Alissa leads the company-wide climate and energy strategy to reduce Target's greenhouse gas footprint. So through engagement with the industry partners, policymakers, and other stakeholders, Target is working to accelerate the transition to a low-carbon economy. One last note before I turn it over, we'll have a Q&A at the end of this webinar, and I would love if you could put your questions in the Q&A or chat boxes, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those at the end. So I will stop my screen share, and I will turn it over to Alissa.
Great, thank you, Lauren. I appreciate the setup. We are joining you live from Katowice, Poland at COP24. I just want to thank my fantastic panelists for joining me today. I'm really excited for the conversation that we're going to have. So I'll start by introducing them. To my right, I have Elan Strait, and he is the Director of U.S. Climate Campaigns at WWF. Next to him, I have Sara Law, and she is the VP of Global Initiatives at the CDP, Carbon Disclosure Project, for those of you who are not familiar. And then finally, on the end, I have Martel, and he is one of our valued partners with Ceres, and he is a Director for Policy Programs. So really great partnerships with all of you. I'm excited to jump in and hear some more for you around here still in. So with that, Sara, I'd like to ask you the first question today. Can you speak a bit about with COP21, as they mentioned, in Paris, kind of leading up to that, what was your journey, and then from there to now COP24, you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure, and hello Minnesota. It's wonderful to join you from Katowice. Alissa, journey is an excellent word to describe it. And I think that for us to really understand the significance of where we're sitting right now, the significance of Paris when we were there, we always need to go back 2 years, 10 years, 20 years earlier than that to understand we were nowhere near the ability to come to a global agreement on climate at Paris. What ourselves and partners such as Ceres, such as WWF worked on in that 2-year period leading up to Paris was to provide a platform to really bring in the private sector, the business sector and society as someone who has a clear stake in the outcome, and therefore there's something that they can actually do about it. The really exciting thing I often speak about is the jump in what we call science-based emissions reduction targets. So take what climate scientists say is really important, translate that into what that means in terms of the share of the business community, what they should contribute towards in terms of emissions, and therefore what they can do about it. And then I really, refine that down to the enterprise level. What can an individual company do? 3 years before Paris, when we first embarked on speaking to the business sector about this, there was very much a scoffing attitude. No, that can't be done. That just isn't how business speaks, and it's not how, frankly, the non-profit, the sort of society sector speaks to business either. But we took part, we all worked together very hard on it. By the time we got to Paris, it was actually something that was quite credible. And it helped people like you and INTERVIEWEES to welcome the business sector to the table as a real partner in the solutions. Fast forward to where we are now, I'm really, really pleased to say that today we announced our 500th company around the world signing up to SBTs. I could whip and I could clap, but I'll leave that till later. And really importantly, in the context of the US audience we're speaking with right now, there are about 100 of the biggest companies in the US who signed up to SBTs. And curiously, more of them have signed up to this in the last 18 months than before it. So just leave you with that.
Thank you. Could you also share, before we move on to Ryan, just with the SBTIs and kind of the future of what maybe you see companies moving toward in that space?
Wow, the big trends that we see for companies is that when, again, to sort of throw back to pre-Paris, it was a, why are you bothering us with this? Why are you knocking on our doors? Can it even really be done? To a complete change in the quality of the conversation now, where it's clear acceptance by almost every sector of business that we deal with. But yes, of course it can be done. It's just a matter of the how, and we have much deeper conversations. And some of the really big drivers are how companies can think about their use of solar products. So the things that they put out there, how can what are the inputs, the resources, and energy that they need to make it, and then when they put that out into the marketplace, and we're talking to the end use consumer as well as like the customers that they provide to, what they can do to put something out there that actually helps others to cut emissions. So tons of value chain engagement, which is fantastic to see. That's how we'll really see this like spreading out like rapid fire to really high.
Fantastic, thank you, Sara. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Ryan for a moment. I'd like you to speak a little bit more about, with our recent reports, the IPCC and the GAP report, when you think about your work in policy and advocacy, can you just speak a little bit more to that, and especially around just the urgency that is required? I'd love to hear some more.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. It's nice to be here. It's nice to be with Climate Generation. Thank you so much for hosting this webinar and to my colleagues. It's a great question, and it's something where at Ceres and I think in other organizations, we've really had to take a step back and think about how, with the release of the recent climate science reports this fall, think about how we do our work, what the expectations are that we have of our partners, of our policymakers, of our governments, and when the IPCC report came out this fall, which for those who don't know was a special report commissioned by the UNFCCC, I believe, to look at the relative impacts of a world that sees a 1.5 degree rise in temperature versus a world that sees a 2 degree rise in temperature. I think people were really shocked by the differences that were articulated in that report. Numbers have started going around that there are 12 years, we have 12 years to get on track, 12 years to reduce our emissions 43%, I think. Those are staggering numbers, especially with the most recent announcement, I think, just in the last couple of days, about the fact that the world as a whole has increased its emissions again this year by 2.5%. So the challenge is it's stark. Sometimes it's a little scary, but I think it's really for a lot of the people with whom we work, with a lot of the businesses with whom we work, we've heard a lot of resolve, and we've heard a lot of folks asking the question, we're doing a science-based target, or we're doing X, Y, or Z. How can we do more? What do we need to do to be in a position where we can achieve these goals? And I wouldn't say it's from everybody yet. Certainly, it's still relatively early days since the reports have come out. But people are asking questions about moving in the right direction. And just to pivot to my role of working on policy specifically at Ceres and with our partners, the ambition of the private sector and all of the groups within the We Are Still in Coalition to reduce emissions is absolutely necessary, but it's probably not sufficient. And to be truly sufficient, to be able to get to where we need to go, even to meet the existing US 2025 target, we need strong policies. And those can come at the state level, at the city level, but at the end of the day, they're going to need to come from the federal government. There will need to be strong policy signals in the US. And part of the work that we do, although not explicitly involved in politics, part of the work we do in We Are Still in is to make the case for more policy sort of by showing or doing, not saying, I guess. By increasing ambition across these sectors, we're creating an enabling environment where it's easier for policymakers to understand and to feel confident in taking on some of this increased ambition. But it's going to be tough, and we certainly know we have our work cut out for us, but we're hopeful.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Definitely important work happening in that area. And finally, the last question here that we've got prepared goes to Elan. So if you can speak, being that we are in we are still in pavilion here, if you could speak a little bit more about kind of coming up out of COP, what you expect to see from businesses in that regard.
Sure, thanks. So also very happy to be here. I have such warm memories of Climate Generation's work in Minnesota in their work to rally to get the governor to join. We Are Still in earlier this year, I think, kind of over the summer. So that was really exciting to see. It really shows the work that civil society and the public can have in engaging with elected officials to get them to take ambitious action on climate change. So what we are still in is, it launched a couple of days after the president announced that he intended to withdraw the United States from the Paris Agreement. And We Are Still In was designed as a way for businesses and cities and states and universities around the country to say that they were still going to uphold the Paris Agreement and they were still going to engage in climate action. We had no idea how many organizations were going to want to make that statement. So we launched 2 days after the announcement. We had 1,200 cities, states, businesses, and universities sign on. By the end of the week, we had 2,000. And now, a year and a half later, we have over 3,500. So it's really caught on, and the reason it's caught on is that people are hungry for the organizations that they interact with every day, whether it's their mayor, whether it's the governor, whether it's the school that they went to, or the businesses that they frequent. They want them to be doing, they want them to be acting on climate. And so We Are Still In affords them that opportunity. What's really going to need to happen in the future is to increase that engagement from signing a statement to taking concrete action. And I think what Sara and Ryan said are the exact ways that would happen. So for the two main things that I think businesses should think about doing coming out of this COP, coming out of having a framework for how to implement Paris out of Poland, is first to think about their own emissions. Can I set, what would it look like for me to set a target that's in line with what the science requires for my business, both with respect to my own materials, but also my supply chain. Companies around the country that have enormous supply chains, whether it's Target or Walmart, have engaged their hundreds of vendors to think about what they should do, which is also extremely important. And the second thing is what Ryan was alluding to, which is how can they engage in policy? At the end of the day, what businesses do with their own emissions matter, but it's never going to add up to what's needed to address the problem. What's really needed is ambitious national and international policy. And like Sara and Ryan were both saying, in order to get there, decision makers need to hear from the private sector. They need to hear it's affecting their bottom line. They need to hear it's good for the economy. They need to hear it's good for jobs. And businesses are lending their voice more and more to that process. And it's really making a big difference. So those are the two things that I think, and I'm glad that I got to follow Sara and Ryan, so I can just say what they said. But I think that's the way that We Are Still In is going, and I think that's what the public is going to see.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Appreciate all of you weighing in. So Lauren, I do want to hand it over to you if we've got questions from the audience for us.
Sure, yeah, so I invite anyone who's watching to type your comments or questions into the chat box or the Q&A. But as we get started, we do have a few. So I'm actually personally interested in what you guys have witnessed, whether you've been there for a day or for the whole week this week, about the U.S. presence that's there and the U.S. Climate Action Center. What does it look like, and what can you translate for people that are back here at home?
Yeah, great question. So we just launched this morning, actually. And what I've seen so far is a tremendous amount of excitement about hearing about what Americans care about climate change, what they're doing on climate change. They know that there's more to the story than what the federal government is saying at the COP. They want to hear the rest of that story. And so we have an event space that we're holding for 4 days for actors around the United States to come to the COP and tell their story. And so far, every event we've held has been standing room only and then out the door. There's been a lot of excitement around it, and it's really been the center of the action so far.
I would just add that just one interesting observation. Being out at the front of the U.S. Climate Action Center at different points in the day, I was probably asked 10 times, "Oh, so you're the U.S. government? You're bringing all of these people together from the U.S. government, right?" We had to explain several times that no, we're a group of businesses, cities, states, faith leaders, healthcare systems, and on. We're coming together to talk about the ambition and the commitments that we have. So that was an interesting sort of in terms of the perception of our center from the other folks at the COP.
So I'm one of those people who only got here late last night. So my observations are limited to the bits of things that I've seen, but two things I have to offer. Which is, one of the great things about being at the COP is, there are all the events that you can go to. But a lot of business gets done, a lot of life gets lived just in corridors where people come out to have coffee. So I walked up to a friend of mine earlier today, Paul, who's this other gentleman who I didn't know. And this guy was just so impressed. He'd just come out of an event after that was held at the Wasn't Space here, where US faith leaders were talking very cogently, very passionately about what they see as a climate problem, how it links with the entirety of the belief system that they stand for, and how eager they are to plug into the solution space of that dialogue. And this person was so energized by it. And if you take that energy and you sort of like, go out through that spiderweb, that's really powerful. That's the stuff that you're not necessarily going to see in the reported document of what happened at the COP. The second thing I want to bring is, again, some national government action is really kicking ass right now. We saw that trend start 18 months ago, again, coinciding with the federal administration's announcement of their intention to pull out. Mayors, governors, comptrollers, you name it, standing up. And I suspect we're going to see a pretty strong showing there again. And again, this comes out of the outcomes of the midterms we've seen recently. We've got a state like North Carolina where the voters passed a ballot paper that blocked any oil and gas drilling in state waters. Like, that's the type of momentum we're taking into this COP. And it's very much so the doing, not just the talking that we were talking about before.
We have a question from, thanks. We have a question from Ben, kind of flowing out of that. He's asking, what's the most exciting or encouraging thing you've heard this week?
That's a good question. Well, I think part of what we just discussed is, for me, some of the most exciting. But all around COPs generally, there are a number of announcements that are made. And I guess I would say the announcement by Excel earlier this week really is one of the things that's getting talked about the most. It's just a game changer in the space of electric utilities in the US and around the world. 100% carbon neutral on the timeline. It's unbelievable. And that is really something people are talking about a lot in the hallways, meetings, getting referenced. There have been some other really big announcements. The New York State comptroller, who runs a $200 billion pension fund, just announced that he was going to dedicate an additional $3 billion, $3 billion to the state's clean energy investment fund for the pensioners. So it's that sort of thing in terms of setting those commitments, but also for folks who have the actual capital and financial stakes, putting their money where their mouth is and starting to invest in clean energy solutions. Those are two of the biggest things that have excited me so far this week.
I was at some discussions earlier today around the global action platform around transportation. And in being part of this panel and hearing the Minister from Portugal talk about how they don't just want to do their share to help the EU to their climate target, but to really engage in a dialogue through all of their constituency groups in Portugal. Hearing that, and then have someone from the audience coming from representing a developing country voice really challenge that and say, how do you take that conversation beyond your national borders? Because you had a ton of time to make the problem, you're better equipped to solve the problem, now come help us with it. And it was a very honest dialogue that I'm not sure we could have had a couple of years ago. I think that the international community and that space is now being created.
Yeah, just to add on a little bit, which is that I've been able to have some conversations today with some negotiators who are working on the formal international negotiations this week, and all of them have expressed some optimism that there'll be a positive outcome at this year's COP, which is not nothing, because you see movements around the world that are slow, like pulling a little bit of progress away at Paris, whether it's what's going on in France right now, the elections in Brazil. But yet the process is marching on, and there's reason for optimism that the Paris process will continue.
Thank you. We also have a question from a class that's washing from Minnesota, Sarah Niemeyer's class. And so the students are wondering, actually for Alissa, this question is targeted to you. What makes Target stand out energy-wise compared to other retailers?
With that, I'm going to ask Sarah to speak about this a little bit as an expert in this space.
I hope the class doesn't mind, and it's because I think it's helpful for Target to work with the civil society space with people like us, because we provide an honest mirror to help reflect back to Target what it's doing, whether it's enough, what more it can do. So Target has been working on this notion of science-based targets that I spoke about before for, gosh, it's going to be at least 12, possibly quite much longer. And in this like sort of technical world about what team needs, and I'm no expert in it, I can tell you that it sort of ticked 2 out of the 3 boxes already. And these boxes are signalized by emissions, whether they're the scope 1 ones, which are the ones it is directly responsible for making, scope 2 ones, which typically is based on what like electricity it buys from, and then the scope 3 ones, which are outside of its existing footprint, but it's sort of within its control, because they're looking at the value chain, like who they buy from, who they deal with, and how they go about thinking about their carbon footprint. So on those first 2 boxes, Target has come out with targets that have received the seal of approval, recognising that they are in line with what climate scientists say is responsible and necessary as target. 25% reductions by 2025, which is like tomorrow. But then, part of this honest feedback that we're able to give in the nonprofit space and holding up that mirror is that 12 months ago when they did send this through, their scope 3 one, the one where they deal with that broader market that they work with, wasn't quite what we thought was the best thing to reflect Target's commitment to their climate policy. And so Alissa and I have been chatting for a bit, and she's given us the insight that over the last 12 months, they've taken that feedback back in-house. And remember, Target isn't one person, there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people with many different interests. Taken that back in-house and thought through what more can they do. So they've worked very, very hard. They've submitted a new target to the external world for people like us to have a look at. Fingers crossed, let's see how they go with that. But they've done a lot of work to focus on 2 things I'd like to mention. First is, again, the products that they sell, what they put out there to help me when I'm buying a fan. Like, is it going to be a type of fan that's going to help me achieve my energy efficiency and therefore reduce my footprint? Or is it going to be something that ticks other boxes like price, but isn't going to tick that really big one? So use of sold product is what we call it. And then the other thing they've looked at is to really deeply engage with the whole ecosystem of people who have an influence over their scope 3, whether that's peers in the industry. So Target recognises that it is not an island, and there is best practice at the pre-competitive stage that they can definitely work with their peers about. They work with those people who sell them the stuff that they then sell to us, so their value chain partners, external stakeholders, and importantly, the policymakers, which is actually really cool. So hopefully that answers the question. I know sometimes it's better from local stuff, but in this instance, maybe better from mine.
Thank you, Sarah. Great job. Lauren, do you have any other questions?
Yes, we also have another one. Ryan talked about corporate commitments. Are you seeing most Fortune 500 companies that have specific target reduction goals, and how public are they being about these goals?
That's a great question. And in fact, there is a report that comes out every year or 2 years on this topic. It's called Power Forward. There have been 3 versions put out already, and it looks at the greenhouse gas, renewable energy, and energy efficiency goals of the Fortune 500 companies in the US. I think that the latest data that we have is from 2015. And there's going to be a new report that is released, hopefully, knock on wood, sometime in the next year. And it finds that somewhere around 50% and I'm looking to Sarah to correct me if I'm a little bit off, of Fortune 500 companies have one of those goals. When you look at Fortune 100 companies, the number goes up to somewhere in the low 60%. So there are a lot more leaders in the Fortune 100 than there are in the entire Fortune 500. And there are probably different reasons for that. But one thing that we do notice is that as a company, if you are a brand name or a consumer brand, someone who has customers that are everyday Americans who really, sometimes who care about the companies that from which they buy, it's a lot more likely that you'll see companies like that set targets or goals related to climate or clean energy.
Awesome. All right, so then I'm also wondering if you guys could speak to any other events or opportunities that you guys are looking to participate in at COP, whether it's you're still in the U.S. Climate Action Center or others.
Well, one thing that we always like to do is try to get a chance to meet with the official U.S. delegation to get a sense from them about what their negotiating priorities are, and also to give them honest feedback on what the priorities are of all of the businesses and cities and states that are here. In the same manner, we also like to meet with any members of the U.S. congressional staff that are here. So we'll have a number of staffers from Congress, from the Senate come, and we'll meet with them and talk to them about our priorities and our stories. So those are two of the things that I'm looking forward to.
So what's going to keep me busy over the next 24 hours is the translation role that I like to play. So I'm based out of CEP's operations in North America. I know the US geography the best, and I think there's been a ton of interesting action there. And so it's about them meeting up with representatives from different countries, and whether they are policymakers or whether they are businesses or whether they are society, to tell them what's going on here in the States. First of all, that you don't despair, there is a ton going on, and it's really exciting and really very quickly. But also to share some of those stories of how 1 + 1 = 5, and how that could be something that you could implement in your own country as well. So there's a lot of translation work that I'll be doing over the programs.
And I'll just add that we're holding the U.S. Climate Action Center for the next 3 days, so it closes Monday night, and we have 18 more events over that period for U.S. actors to talk about what they're doing on climate. A couple of the events that will be the most interesting, I think, are doing an event on the results of the midterm elections. So what do the midterms mean for climate policy in the United States, which should be quite interesting. And then the other is we're doing an event on what is the National Climate Assessment. The report that recently came out from the federal government showing that climate change is already affecting every walk of life in the United States. What does that mean for Americans? And what does that mean for the future of the United States in terms of climate change?
Thank you. What about you? I think for me, I'm really excited to be here, and I think I'm here just to learn and network and take in as much as I possibly can. Huge thank you to Climate Generation for making this possible. These are definitely very important conversations, and I'm grateful to be part of them.
Great. So we have one last question, and then I'll turn it back to you, Alissa. Where does your biggest inspiration come from?
This is going to sound really corny, bear with me, but before we started, we were doing sound check and whatnot. Ryan showed me a video of his little daughter sitting in the living room, in her chair, eating her cereals with the dog in the background. That's all the motivation I need, really.
I feel like you stole Ryan's answer.
I didn't realize that you were going to say my kids. But no, I mean, it is my kids, but it's everybody. I mean, when I sort of had made the decision to work on climate change for my career, it was, partially primarily out of this sense of the threats and the opportunity that there is this huge challenge. And everyone, we all do our little piece in it. We hope it's enough. But yeah, for me, it's about my kids, and it's about my coworker, my colleagues here, and their kids as well.
For me, it's also Ryan's kids.
Oh, and my own.
Great. Alyssa, did you have any other questions for our panelists?
I think just kind of, if you could all maybe leave a parting thought. Of course, every COP is important. In coming out of Paris in 2015 and looking at today as kind of the Paris 2.0, and I know the next really pivotal COP will be coming in 2020. And so if there's one hope that businesses in particular take away from this COP to help us achieve results, I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. So I think the most important thing to take away from this COP is that it concludes the sort of rigorous, detailed negotiations that came out of Paris. And so if you were waiting for the international signal that it's time to get started on climate action, this is the signal. It's time to get started. It's now our turn. And so turning to 2020, if we're really going to increase global ambition on climate the way we need to, we have to get started right away, and there's nothing left to wait for.
I hate to finish on a negative note, so let me try and make it positive. To my business constituency, friends out there, if you're listening to this webinar, then you probably get it already. But I challenge you to go and speak to 2 people in your business world who aren't watching this and then perhaps don't get it. Because the message I leave with you is that, as Ryan mentioned, you can expect to see some pretty cool announcements coming out this week. We've already had some. For instance, Maersk made an announcement earlier this week. So there are going to be a ton of announcements, and there is a lot of energy in the business sector across even some of the hardest to move sectors traditionally speaking. So if you have not rolled up your sleeves already, your investors are going to be knocking on your doors, your peers are going to be getting ahead of you, and you'll find your customers will be asking a big question why they should park their money with you as well.
Sorry.
And your employees.
And your employees.
So my hope is that businesses do everything that Elan and Sara suggested, and that they start thinking, and many are, and do, really, really seriously about what it means to be true players in policy advocacy. Businesses can have a lot of self-interest when it comes to, in a good way, when it comes to looking at ways to procure renewable energy or to be energy efficient, and policy plays a role there. But it's time now for companies of all sizes, from a local coffee shop to multinational corporation, to think beyond their own operations and to think about how their voice and their influence can help to influence the larger policy conversation.
Well, with that, I would like to just thank my panelists for spending some time talking with us tonight. I really appreciate your partnership here and outside of this building, outside of COP. It's really great to work with each of you, so thank you. And thank you to Lauren and the Climate Gen team for making this possible.
Definitely. Thank you. Also to all of you, so great to have you guys join us from Poland and give that inside look. And just to close us out today, I'm going to encourage everybody following and everybody in Poland too to follow our COP24 delegation. We have 4 business leaders, as I mentioned, from Best Buy, Target, BWBR Solutions, which is an architecture firm here in Minnesota, as well as Fig and Farro, which is a plant-based restaurant here in Minnesota. You can follow them at www.climategen.org/COP24, and we're also interacting with the experience on our social channels as well. And I wanted to encourage people to save the date as well. Our next webinar with Jesse Turk from BWBR is on Monday, December 10th at 1 p.m., which is Minnesota time, 8 p.m. Poland time. And we'll be talking about what he's experiencing over the weekend and in his first week there at COP as well. And we're also excited on December 19th to broadcast again from Minnesota this time with our COP24 delegates as they reflect on their experience and what they are bringing back to Minnesota. So we'd love to have you. Those are both live streams, which you can find the links for to register at climategen.org, COP24. And again, thank you to all of our panelists. I hope that COP24 was a wonderful experience for all of you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you all. Have a great one. Bye.
Yes, bye.